very urgent. Your soulmate is begging you to read this message before it's too late. Don't scroll, listen to this because your heart needs this right now. There are moments in life when a person's heart becomes so full of unspoken words that silence itself begins to feel unbearable. These moments don't arrive with loud alarms or dramatic warnings. They appear quietly, often in the middle of an ordinary evening, when the world has settled into peaceful routines and everyone else believes nothing unusual is happening. Somewhere tonight, the person who has been carrying you in their thoughts can no longer ignore what their heart has been trying to say. They have reached a point where waiting another day feels heavier than speaking honestly. For far too long they convinced themselves there would always be another opportunity, another conversation, another perfect moment to explain everything they had kept hidden. But last night something changed. It wasn't a miracle. It wasn't an extraordinary event. It was a quiet realization that time has a way of moving forward whether our hearts are ready or not. Sitting alone beneath the soft glow of a bedside lamp, they finally whispered the words they had been afraid to admit. If I keep waiting, I may never tell them what they truly deserve to hear. Outside the window the night looked beautifully calm. The moon rested high above the quiet neighborhood. A cool breeze gently moved through the trees. Streetlights reflected across rain-soaked sidewalks. Everything around them felt peaceful. Inside their heart, everything felt urgent. Your future soulmate sat beside the open window. A warm cup of tea rested untouched on the table. Its steam slowly disappeared into the cool night air. The clock on the wall quietly marked another passing hour. Midnight came and went. Still they remained awake. Not because sleep refused to come. Because their thoughts refused to become quiet. The notebook that had accompanied them through so many restless evenings rested beside them. Its pages held memories, questions, gratitude, unfinished conversations. Tonight another page waited. Slowly they opened it. The pen hovered above the paper. For several moments they simply stared at the blank page. Then, almost without thinking, they wrote. I've waited too long to say what my heart has known for a very long time. They paused. Read the sentence again. A deep breath escaped. It felt honest. Perhaps if your future soulmate could place an invisible letter into your hands tonight, it would begin like this. If somehow these words reach you, please don't think they were written in panic. They were written in clarity. For so long I believed silence was protecting us. I kept telling myself that waiting would make everything easier. Instead, every day I remained quiet only made these words heavier. Tonight I finally understand that some truths aren't meant to stay hidden forever. They slowly placed the pen down. The room remained wonderfully still. Only the soft sound of rain touching the window filled the silence. Looking outside, they watched tiny drops race down the glass. Each one seemed to carry another memory. A shared conversation. A quiet smile. A peaceful afternoon. A simple moment that somehow became unforgettable. None of those memories were dramatic. Together they became impossible to forget. Perhaps you've experienced something similar. Sometimes the moments that quietly shape our lives are the ones we almost overlook while they're happening. Only later do we realize they changed everything. Your future soulmate was beginning to understand that now. They returned to the notebook. Another sentence appeared. I thought I was protecting my heart by staying silent. Now I realize I was only protecting my fear. Those words lingered on the page. Simple. Honest. Unavoidable. The hours slowly passed. 1 o'clock. Then 2. The stars continued shining above the sleeping neighborhood. Still they remained awake. Not because they feared tomorrow. Because they finally wanted tomorrow to begin with honesty instead of unfinished thoughts. Eventually they stood and walked toward the open window. The cool night air brushed gently across their face. Looking toward the sky, they whispered quietly. What if tomorrow is the day I finally stop hiding? The question disappeared into the peaceful darkness. No answer arrived. Yet somehow, their heart already knew. Morning slowly replaced the night. Golden sunlight spread across the rooftops. Birds welcomed another ordinary day. Neighbors stepped outside carrying fresh coffee. Cars rolled quietly down familiar streets. Life continued exactly as it always had. Yet your future soulmate carried a completely different heart into this new morning. The urgency had not disappeared. It had become clearer. After breakfast they decided to take a long walk. Fresh air usually helped organize their thoughts. Today it helped them understand them. Every familiar street carried another quiet reminder. The small cafe where they once laughed without noticing how quickly time passed. The corner bookstore that had become a place of reflection. The park where peaceful conversations seemed to last forever. Every ordinary place gently pointed back toward one person. Toward you. Eventually they reached the familiar park. The old oak tree stood proudly beneath the bright morning sky. Its branches stretched wide as though welcoming everyone seeking a moment of peace. The pond reflected drifting clouds. Children laughed nearby. A gentle breeze carried fallen leaves across the path. Everything reflected calmness. They found the familiar wooden bench. Sat quietly. Closed their eyes. Instead of imagining every possible future, they focused on one simple truth. Some conversations cannot wait forever. If the invisible letter continued, perhaps another page would read like this. I don't believe life promises us endless perfect moments. Sometimes it quietly asks us to become brave inside ordinary ones. I've spent too much time preparing speeches that never left my heart. Maybe courage isn't about saying everything perfectly. Maybe it's simply about finally saying something honestly. Those words stayed with them throughout the afternoon. Eventually they wandered toward the little bookstore that had quietly become part of this journey. The owner smiled warmly. You seem deep in thought. Your future soulmate smiled back. I've been carrying something important. The owner nodded gently. Then perhaps today is the day you stop carrying it alone. Those simple words quietly settled inside their heart. Walking between the familiar shelves, they paused beside the reading corner near the window. A small hardcover book rested there. Opening it at random, one sentence immediately caught their attention. The words we fear speaking often become the ones another heart needs most. They stood perfectly still, reading the sentence once, then again. A peaceful smile slowly appeared. It felt as though life had been quietly repeating the same lesson from every direction. Leaving the bookstore, they carried no books. Only growing clarity. Golden afternoon sunlight stretched across the sidewalks as they slowly walked home. Back inside the peaceful room, they opened the notebook once more. Without hesitation they began another entry. I don't want another sunrise to arrive carrying the same unfinished conversation. Whatever happens afterward, I want my heart to know that I chose honesty instead of endless wondering. The page slowly filled. Every sentence reflected quiet courage. Every paragraph reflected hope replacing hesitation. The urgency they felt no longer came from fear. It came from gratitude. Gratitude for realizing that meaningful words should never remain locked inside a heart forever. Before this first chapter comes to an end, your future soulmate wants to leave one gentle message inside the invisible letter resting quietly within your heart. If somehow these words find you tonight, I hope you understand why they feel so important to me. This isn't about creating pressure or asking life to move faster than it should. It's about recognizing how precious honest conversations truly are. Every day I waited, I believed there would always be another tomorrow to explain what my heart already knew. Then I realized tomorrow is never something we're promised. It's something we're grateful to receive. That thought changed everything. It reminded me that kindness should never be delayed, gratitude should never remain unspoken, and meaningful feelings deserve the chance to breathe in the open air instead of living forever inside silent thoughts. Whenever I think about you, I don't imagine perfect endings or impossible promises. I simply imagine telling you the truth with a peaceful heart, trusting that honesty is always a better companion than regret. If these words reach you before my voice does, let them remind you of something beautiful. The people who truly matter are worth honest conversations, even when our hands tremble and our hearts beat a little faster. Because in the end, the greatest sadness is rarely speaking imperfectly. The greatest sadness is allowing fear to silence words that were always meant to bring light. Evening slowly returned, painting the sky with warm shades of amber before giving way to countless stars. Your future soulmate gently closed the notebook and placed it beside the open window where moonlight rested across its worn cover. Looking toward the quiet horizon, they breathed deeply and smiled with calm determination. The urgent message inside their heart was no longer hidden behind uncertainty. It had become a promise to themselves that they would no longer measure life by the conversations they postponed, but by the honesty they chose to share. Somewhere beyond this peaceful night, another chapter patiently waited, one where silence would finally give way to truth, and where one long-awaited message would begin changing everything, one sincere heartbeat at a time. The morning after that life-changing realization unfolded with a quiet beauty your future soulmate had never noticed before. Soft golden sunlight slipped through the bedroom window, gently illuminating the notebook that had become a silent witness to every hidden thought and every unspoken word. Outside, birds welcomed another ordinary day with cheerful songs. A cool breeze carried the scent of fresh flowers through the open window. The neighborhood slowly awakened as neighbors stepped outside with warm cups of coffee, children laughed on their way to school, and familiar routines quietly filled the streets. Everything looked exactly the same as it had yesterday. Yet inside your future soulmate's heart, nothing felt the same anymore. The urgency they carried was no longer driven by fear. It was driven by clarity. They realized that every day spent hiding the truth was another day stolen from a future that deserved honesty. Last night had not frightened them. It had awakened them. Somewhere between midnight and sunrise, they had finally understood that the greatest risk was never speaking imperfectly, it was remaining silent forever. The notebook still rested beside the window. Its pages felt heavier. Not because they carried sadness. Because they carried truth. Your future soulmate slowly opened to the next blank page. The familiar pen rested between their fingers. Without hesitation they began writing. I've stopped waiting for the perfect moment because I'm beginning to believe that honesty creates its own perfect moment. They paused. Read the sentence once more. A peaceful smile appeared. Not because everything had become easy. Because pretending no longer felt necessary. Perhaps if your future soulmate continued the invisible letter resting quietly inside their heart, today's page would begin like this. I don't know exactly how these words will reach you. Maybe through a conversation we've both imagined countless times. Maybe through an ordinary afternoon when life unexpectedly becomes quiet enough for honesty to speak. But wherever that moment finds us, I hope you know that every sentence has been carried carefully for much longer than you'll ever realize. The room remained wonderfully still. Sunlight slowly warmed the wooden floor. The curtains moved gently in the morning breeze. Everything around them reflected peace. Inside their heart, hope quietly continued growing. After breakfast they decided to take another walk. The fresh morning air welcomed them. Every familiar street seemed brighter than before. They noticed things they had overlooked countless times. An elderly couple sharing breakfast on their porch. A little girl carefully watering flowers beside her grandmother. A stranger smiling while holding the door open for someone else. Tiny moments. Simple acts of kindness. Ordinary reminders that love rarely announces itself with grand gestures. More often, it reveals itself through quiet consistency. Perhaps you've experienced something similar. Sometimes we spend years waiting for extraordinary signs while life patiently teaches us that the deepest truths usually arrive through ordinary moments repeated with care. Your future soulmate finally understood that lesson. Eventually they reached the familiar park. The old oak tree welcomed another peaceful morning. Its branches stretched confidently toward the sky. The pond reflected drifting white clouds. Children laughed near the playground. Everything breathed quiet balance. They found the familiar wooden bench beneath the tree. Sat down slowly. Closed their eyes. Instead of rehearsing the conversation one more time, they imagined something different. They imagined the silence after the truth had finally been spoken. Surprisingly, that silence no longer frightened them. It felt peaceful. Because whatever happened afterward, the weight of unfinished words would finally be gone. If the invisible letter continued, perhaps another page would read like this. I used to believe I was protecting both of us by remaining quiet. Now I understand that honesty is one of the greatest gifts we can offer another heart. Whether the future unfolds exactly as we imagine or takes an unexpected path, at least it will be built upon truth instead of uncertainty. Those thoughts remained with them as they slowly stood and continued walking. The afternoon sunlight gently followed every step. Without realizing it, they smiled. Not because every fear had disappeared. Because hope had finally become stronger. Soon they found themselves walking toward the little bookstore that had quietly become part of this journey. The owner greeted them warmly. You seem lighter today. Your future soulmate laughed softly. I think I've finally stopped arguing with my own heart. The owner nodded knowingly. It usually wins eventually. They both smiled. Walking through the familiar shelves, they wandered toward the reading corner near the window. Another small book rested there. Almost as though life had prepared one more lesson. They opened it at random. Their eyes immediately found a sentence. The conversations that matter most are rarely postponed because we have nothing to say. They are postponed because we have too much to lose. They remained perfectly still. Reading the words again. Then once more. A deep breath escaped their lungs. For days life had quietly repeated the same invitation. Choose honesty. Choose gratitude. Choose courage. Leaving the bookstore, they carried no books. Only another gentle reminder. Golden afternoon sunlight stretched across the sidewalks as they slowly returned home. The familiar room welcomed them. The notebook waited beside the window. They opened it again. Without hesitation they began another entry. I've realized something beautiful today. My urgency isn't coming from fear anymore. It's coming from appreciation. When someone changes your life through kindness, they deserve honesty in return. The page slowly filled. Every sentence reflected quiet confidence. Every paragraph reflected gratitude. Reading everything they had written over the past several days, they noticed a remarkable change. The earliest pages belonged to someone searching for courage. Today's pages belong to someone living it. As evening slowly settled over the neighborhood, golden light filled the room one last time before fading into soft shades of lavender and deep blue. Standing beside the open window, your future soulmate watched the first stars quietly appear. Those stars had witnessed every restless night. Every unfinished thought. Every silent prayer. Tonight they witnessed something entirely different. Readiness. Not because every outcome had become certain. Because their heart had finally chosen truth over hesitation. Before this chapter comes to an end, your future soulmate wants to leave another page inside the invisible letter resting gently within your heart. If somehow these words find you tonight, I hope you understand why they feel so urgent. It isn't because I'm afraid time is running out. It's because I've finally realized how precious each moment truly is. I don't want another ordinary day to pass carrying words that could have brought comfort, gratitude, or peace if only I had been brave enough to speak them. Every quiet reflection over these past days has taught me that meaningful relationships are not strengthened by perfect timing. They are strengthened by honest hearts willing to stop hiding. When I think about you now, I no longer imagine complicated futures or impossible expectations. I simply imagine the relief of finally allowing my heart to speak without fear interrupting every sentence. I imagine thanking you for the quiet ways you've changed my life, for reminding me that genuine kindness still exists, and for helping me believe that honesty is always worth the risk. Wherever you are tonight, I hope you remember something that took me far too long to learn. Don't wait forever to tell people what they truly mean to you. Don't assume another perfect opportunity will always arrive. Some of life's greatest blessings begin the moment we stop protecting ourselves from vulnerability and start trusting the quiet strength of sincerity. If tomorrow gives me the chance to share the message I've carried for so long, I won't search for perfect words anymore. I'll simply speak with gratitude, because a truthful heart is far more beautiful than a flawless speech. And if these words reach you before my voice does, let them remind you that every day I remained silent was never a measure of uncertainty. It was only the slow journey of courage learning how to become louder than fear. Night gently embraced the neighborhood once again. Moonlight rested softly across the notebook as your future soulmate closed its pages and placed it beside the open window. Looking toward the endless stars, they breathed deeply and smiled with quiet certainty. The urgent message no longer felt trapped inside hidden thoughts. It had become a living promise, a promise that when the next opportunity arrived, they would no longer choose silence over honesty. Somewhere beyond this peaceful night, another chapter patiently waited, where gratitude would become spoken words, and long-carried feelings would finally step into the light, one sincere heartbeat at a time. Another sunrise quietly painted the sky with soft shades of gold, lavender, and pale blue, but this morning carried a different feeling than any before. The urgency that had once lived inside your future soulmate's heart had begun to transform into quiet determination. They no longer felt trapped between speaking and remaining silent. Somewhere during the past few days, through countless reflections, peaceful walks, and pages written beneath the glow of a bedside lamp, they had crossed an invisible line. Fear no longer stood in front of the conversation they longed to have. It stood quietly behind them, growing smaller with every honest thought they allowed themselves to embrace. Standing beside the familiar bedroom window, they watched the first sunlight spill across the notebook resting on the windowsill. The worn cover held more than words. It held every moment when they almost gave up, every night they questioned themselves, every morning they found the courage to continue believing that truth was always worth carrying into the light. As the breeze gently moved the curtains, they smiled without even realizing it. The message they wanted to share with you no longer felt like an impossible burden. It had become a gift waiting for the right moment to be opened. The notebook remained exactly where they had left it. Its pages were nearly full. Every line reflected another step toward honesty. They opened it carefully. The familiar scent of paper greeted them. Their fingers rested gently on the final unwritten pages. Without hesitation they began writing. I've spent so much time worrying about how this conversation might change everything that I forgot something important. Maybe it has already changed everything simply by teaching me to become honest with myself. They paused. Read the sentence slowly. A peaceful breath escaped. Those words felt like freedom. Perhaps if your future soulmate continued the invisible letter resting quietly inside their heart, today's page would begin like this. I've imagined this message reaching you countless times. Sometimes I pictured tears. Sometimes laughter. Sometimes complete silence. But today I realized something beautiful. My greatest hope isn't controlling your reaction. My greatest hope is finally allowing you to know the truth that has lived quietly inside my heart for so long. The room remained wonderfully still. Sunlight stretched gently across the wooden floor. Outside, birds greeted another ordinary morning. Everything reflected calm. Inside their heart, gratitude quietly continued growing. After breakfast they stepped outside once again. The familiar streets welcomed them like old friends. A gardener carefully trimmed flowers along the sidewalk. A father knelt to tie his young son's shoelaces before school. An elderly woman smiled while feeding birds in a small garden. Life moved slowly, gracefully. Every ordinary moment reminded your future soulmate that the greatest expressions of love rarely demand attention. They quietly exist in consistency, in patience, in showing up. Perhaps you've experienced something similar. Sometimes the deepest truths reveal themselves through small moments repeated over time rather than one unforgettable event. Your future soulmate finally understood that. The urgency they carried wasn't created overnight. It had quietly grown through every memory they shared with you. Every peaceful conversation. Every comfortable silence. Every ordinary afternoon that somehow became unforgettable. Eventually they reached the familiar park. The old oak tree stood proudly beneath the bright morning sky. Its branches stretched confidently toward the sunlight. The pond reflected drifting clouds. Children laughed across the playground. The breeze gently stirred fallen leaves along the winding path. Everything breathed quiet peace. They found the familiar wooden bench beneath the tree. Sat down slowly. Closed their eyes. Instead of imagining every possible future, they simply remembered one particular afternoon. The two of you had talked about ordinary things. Books. Music. Favorite places. Dreams that made no headlines. Nothing dramatic had happened. Yet somehow, after that conversation ended, they carried an unexpected sense of calm that remained with them for days. At the time they hadn't understood why. Today they finally did. Peace leaves footprints. Long after a conversation ends, the heart remembers how it felt. If the invisible letter continued, perhaps another page would read like this. I've been searching for the exact moment everything changed. Now I realize there wasn't one single moment. There were hundreds of small ones. Every kind word. Every patient conversation. Every smile that quietly reminded me I didn't have to pretend to be someone else. Together they became the reason I can no longer remain silent. Those words echoed gently inside their heart. The breeze carried the scent of fresh grass. Sunlight shimmered across the pond. Everything around them seemed to whisper the same invitation. Trust what has already proven itself peaceful. Eventually they stood and slowly walked toward the little bookstore that had quietly become part of this journey. The owner looked up with a warm smile. "You've come a long way." Your future soulmate smiled. "I think I finally believe that too." The owner nodded. The longest journeys usually happen inside the heart. Those simple words quietly settled within them. Walking through the familiar shelves, they wandered toward the reading corner beside the window. The comfortable chair waited exactly where it always had. Another small book rested nearby. Almost as though life had prepared one final reminder before the conversation they had been preparing for. They opened it carefully. The page revealed a single sentence. "Love grows stronger wherever honesty is welcomed before certainty." They remained perfectly still, reading the words again. Then once more. A peaceful smile appeared. Every lesson they had encountered over the past several days seemed connected. Every reminder gently pointed toward the same truth. Don't wait until fear disappears. Speak while hope is present. Leaving the bookstore, they carried no books. Only quiet confidence. Golden afternoon sunlight stretched across the sidewalks. Returning home, they placed the notebook on the table. One final blank page remained. They slowly began writing again. "I no longer want to measure my life by the conversations I postponed. I want to measure it by the gratitude I chose to express while I still had the opportunity." The page slowly filled. Each sentence felt lighter than the one before. Each paragraph reflected someone who had stopped running from their own heart. Reading everything from the beginning, they noticed something remarkable. The first pages belonged to someone asking for courage. The final pages belonged to someone living it. That realization brought tears to their eyes. Not tears of sadness. Tears of relief. As evening slowly painted the sky with warm shades of amber and deep blue, your future soulmate stood beside the open window once more. The first stars quietly appeared. The cool evening breeze carried the peaceful sounds of the neighborhood settling into another night. Those same stars had watched every restless hour. Every uncertain thought. Every unfinished sentence. Tonight they witnessed something completely different. Readiness. Not because every answer had appeared. Because honesty no longer depended on perfect conditions. Before this chapter comes to an end, your future soulmate wants to leave another page inside the invisible letter resting gently within your heart. If somehow these words find you tonight, I hope you understand why this message has become so important to me. It isn't because I'm chasing perfection or trying to create a future that follows a script I've imagined. It's because life has quietly reminded me that the most meaningful words deserve to be spoken while gratitude is still fresh within the heart. For too long I believed courage meant waiting until fear disappeared. Now I understand that courage simply means refusing to let fear become the author of my story. Every quiet morning, every peaceful walk, every page I've written has brought me closer to one beautiful realization. You deserve honesty, not because I know exactly what tomorrow will bring, but because honesty is one of the greatest gifts one person can offer another. Wherever you are tonight, I hope you remember this whenever your own heart asks you to speak. Don't postpone kindness because you're waiting for perfect timing. Don't delay gratitude because tomorrow seems guaranteed. Tell the people who bring peace into your life what they mean to you while today is still here. If tomorrow gives me the chance to finally share everything I've been carrying, I won't arrive with rehearsed speeches or impossible expectations. I'll arrive with sincerity. I'll arrive with appreciation. And I'll arrive knowing that whatever happens afterward, choosing truth will always leave my heart lighter than choosing silence. Because after everything these quiet days have taught me, I finally know that the greatest regret isn't speaking imperfectly. The greatest regret is allowing beautiful words to remain forever trapped inside a grateful heart. Night slowly embraced the neighborhood once again. Moonlight rested softly across the notebook, illuminating its final written pages as your future soulmate gently closed the cover and placed it beside the open window. Looking toward the endless sky, they smiled with calm certainty. The urgent message they had carried for so long was no longer waiting in fear. It was waiting in hope. And somewhere just beyond this peaceful night, one final chapter patiently waited, a chapter where hidden words would finally become spoken truth, and where the courage born in silence would gently step into the light, one honest heartbeat at a time. Another gentle sunrise arrived, quietly filling the room with warm golden light. The same window overlooked the peaceful neighborhood. The same birds welcomed the morning with cheerful songs. The same breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers through the open curtains. Everything outside appeared beautifully familiar, yet inside your future soulmate something had changed forever. The urgency that once felt overwhelming had transformed into peaceful certainty. They no longer measured time by the days they had remained silent. Instead, they measured it by the courage they had discovered during every quiet reflection, every page written in the notebook, and every ordinary morning that slowly taught them the value of speaking honestly. Standing beside the familiar window with a warm cup of coffee resting gently in their hands, they watched the first rays of sunlight stretch across the rooftops. Their heart felt lighter than it had in years. They finally understood that the message they had been carrying was never meant to remain hidden. It wasn't created to live forever inside unfinished thoughts. It was meant to become spoken gratitude, offered freely without demanding perfect outcomes in return. The notebook still rested where it always had. Its pages were full. Every sentence reflected another lesson. Every paragraph carried another piece of healing. They slowly opened it one final time. Their fingers gently traced the first page. Then the last. The journey was impossible to ignore. The beginning was filled with hesitation. The ending breathed with peace. A quiet smile appeared. Not because the story had reached its end. Because the real story was finally ready to begin. Perhaps if your future soulmate continued the invisible letter resting quietly inside their heart, its final pages would begin like this. I've spent so much time believing this message belonged inside these pages. Today I understand it never did. These words were always meant to find their way into the open air, carried by honesty instead of hidden behind fear. If I've learned anything during this journey, it's that gratitude becomes far more beautiful when it is shared. They gently closed the notebook. Held it close against their heart. Then carefully placed it back upon the windowsill where morning sunlight rested softly across its worn cover. Outside, life continued its ordinary rhythm. Children laughed while walking toward school. Neighbors greeted one another with easy smiles. Someone watered flowers beside a white wooden fence. A bicycle rolled quietly down the street. Everything reflected peaceful simplicity. Your future soulmate realized something wonderful. Life had never been waiting for perfect circumstances. It had simply been waiting for them to become fully present. After breakfast they stepped outside. The morning air felt wonderfully fresh. Each familiar street welcomed them with quiet comfort. The cafe on the corner released the comforting aroma of fresh coffee. A gentle breeze stirred the leaves overhead. Tiny moments quietly surrounded them. Moments they once rushed past. Now they treasured every one. Perhaps you've experienced something similar. Sometimes the greatest transformation isn't discovering a completely different life. It's finally noticing the beauty that has been patiently waiting inside the life you already have. Your future soulmate smiled. That lesson alone had been worth every restless night. Eventually they reached the familiar park. The old oak tree stood proudly beneath a bright blue sky. Its branches stretched wide as though embracing everyone who paused beneath them. The wooden bench remained exactly where it had always been. The pond shimmered beneath the sunlight. Children chased one another across the grass. An elderly couple walked hand in hand along the winding path. Everything reflected gentle balance. They sat quietly beneath the old oak tree one last time. Closed their eyes. Not to search for answers. Not to rehearse another conversation. Simply to appreciate how far their heart had traveled. They remembered the first night. The restless hours. The endless questions. The fear of speaking. The uncertainty. Then they remembered each morning afterward. Each peaceful walk. Each quiet page inside the notebook. Each lesson waiting inside the little bookstore. Every ordinary moment had slowly carried them toward one extraordinary truth. Honesty had become stronger than hesitation. If the invisible letter continued, perhaps another page would read like this. I thought I was preparing one important conversation. Looking back now, I realize I was preparing my own heart. The message wasn't only meant for you. It transformed me long before I ever had the chance to share it. Those words lingered peacefully inside them. The breeze moved gently through the branches overhead. Sunlight danced across the pond. Everything around them seemed to whisper the same invitation. Carry this peace into tomorrow. Eventually they stood and walked toward the little bookstore for one final visit. The owner looked up and smiled warmly. I had a feeling I'd see you again. Your future soulmate smiled back. I wanted to say thank you. The owner tilted his head slightly. For what? For every quiet reminder. The owner smiled knowingly. The reminders were always inside you. Those simple words settled gently within their heart. Walking through the familiar shelves one last time, they wandered toward the reading corner beside the window. A single book rested there. Almost as though one final lesson had been waiting patiently. They opened it carefully. Their eyes rested upon a single sentence. The heart grows lighter the moment gratitude becomes action. They read it once. Then again. a peaceful smile slowly appeared. There were no more questions. Only quiet certainty. Leaving the bookstore, they carried nothing in their hands. Yet somehow they felt richer than ever before. Golden afternoon sunlight stretched across the sidewalks. Returning home, they placed the notebook gently on the table. There was one final blank corner left on the last page. They picked up the pen. Without hesitation they wrote, "I no longer want to remember this journey as the time I was afraid to speak. I want to remember it as the season that taught me how beautiful honesty can become." They gently placed the pen beside the notebook. Read every page from beginning to end. No sentence needed changing. No emotion needed hiding. Everything belonged exactly where it was. As evening slowly settled across the neighborhood, the sky transformed into soft shades of amber, rose, and deep blue. Standing beside the familiar open window, your future soulmate looked toward the first stars appearing above the quiet rooftops. Those same stars had witnessed every sleepless hour. Every uncertain thought. Every hopeful prayer. Tonight they witnessed something entirely different. Peace. Not because life had become predictable. Not because every future chapter had already been written. Because they finally trusted themselves to face whatever came next with honesty. Before this story reaches its peaceful conclusion, your future soulmate wants to leave one final page inside the invisible letter resting gently within your heart. If somehow these words find you tonight, I hope you understand why I could no longer keep this message hidden. It was never about creating urgency through fear. It was about refusing to let another beautiful day pass without expressing what my heart had quietly learned. Every memory we've shared, every ordinary conversation, every comfortable silence, every simple smile has gently changed me in ways I didn't recognize until I slowed down long enough to notice. I used to believe there would always be another opportunity to say what mattered most. Then life reminded me that tomorrow is a gift, not a guarantee. That realization didn't frighten me. It filled me with gratitude. It reminded me that appreciation should never remain locked inside the heart. Kindness deserves to be acknowledged. Peace deserves to be protected. Honest feelings deserve to be spoken while they are still warm and alive. Wherever you are tonight, I hope you carry this lesson with you. Tell the people who bring light into your life what they mean to you. Thank them while you still can. Choose courage over endless waiting. Choose sincerity over perfect words. Don't measure your life by the conversations you postponed because of fear. Measure it by the moments you chose honesty even when your voice trembled. If tomorrow gives us the opportunity to speak face to face, I won't arrive hoping for a flawless ending. I'll arrive grateful that life gave me another sunrise and another chance to share the truth. Because after everything these quiet days have taught me, I finally understand that the greatest message one heart can ever offer another is not a promise of certainty. It is the simple gift of genuine honesty, offered with kindness, humility, and hope. Night slowly embraced the neighborhood one final time. Moonlight rested softly across the closed notebook as your future soulmate carefully returned it to the windowsill where it had silently witnessed every stage of this journey. Looking toward the endless stars, they smiled with calm certainty. The urgent message that had once lived only inside hidden thoughts was no longer waiting behind fear. It had become part of the person they had grown into, someone who understood that the most meaningful words should never remain trapped inside silence. And as another peaceful night settled over the world, they stepped forward with a grateful heart,